What do parents need to know about the current number one hit song on Billboard Chart's Top 100? Find out next on the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast. Welcome again to the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Keven Newsome.
I'm Craig Thompson. That's Adam Whiteside. Together, we are the pastors here, three of the pastors here at Malvern Hill Baptist Church. I'm also a podcast host myself and host a podcast called the Ordinary Christian Podcast. If all goes well today, we will cross-post this in two different places.
Yeah, we decided to do this because we had a conversation in the hallway yesterday, and I thought this would be a great topic to talk about on my podcast, and I pitched it to Craig, and he said, you know what, we should probably put it on his podcast as well, and so we're going to have that conversation and post it in both places. So, Craig, we're just going to throw it out there. Why don't you rehash what you came into the office talking about yesterday?
So I spent a lot of years in youth ministry and senior pastor here now, but one of the things that I've always been interested in is youth culture and the way that our children are interacted. Of course, I'm a parent now of two youth, not two teenagers quite yet, as well as two that are just behind them. Adam's our student pastor here. And the other night I was at home and looking through the Billboard Top 100 and just caught really off guard by some of the music that's really infecting our culture today. We've got that in conjunction with what we're seeing. We had already talked about it, and it's catching lots of social media attention with this Cuties Netflix deal that appears to be something closely related to softcore porn. That might be a little strong, but I'm not 100% sure. I haven't watched it, but just from the graphic descriptions that I've heard. And really just kind of walked in, just said, "Hey guys, have y'all seen this stuff?" And I think what I said to Adam, I said, I remember when I was in student ministry, and the music or songs that I was concerned about, and yet they didn't relate or rank anywhere near where we are with the popular music of today. So
what you're talking about, just to sort of clue everybody in, is the number one song on Billboard's Top 100 right now is basically pornography.
It really is, and as a matter of fact, we just talked about it. We're not going to give the name simply because we can't even really give the name without a reference to some really filthy, profane language. So we're not going to share the name of that. But I just was shocked and saddened and angered and all the other things as I read it. I'm not really easily shocked anymore. I don't feel like I am, and yet there I read that and went, "Oh my goodness, what in the world have we gotten ourselves into?" And then, of course, we've got it's not just we've got a culture surrounding that's promoting that. We even have political people in places of political power that are promoting this person who sings this, and it's not been that long ago that a politician would have been terrified to have been associated with an artist that would put out that kind of filth.
And it's not just that. We were home watching a Netflix science show that's designed for kids, and I don't mind naming that show. It's called Brainchild. Really, really great, and our kids love it. But just in passing, they referenced this artist.
Really?
Yeah, and so this artist she is an influencer. She has been put out there as an influencer to our young people.
Yeah, this is mainstream. I mean, you're not surprised by you spend a lot more time with our teenagers than Kevin and I do, so you're not surprised by this stuff.
So how pervasive is this type of music in the teens right now?
And that's what my first comment was going to be. The reason that we're talking about this is because it is out there for my kids, your kids, to associate with. And the pervasiveness is going to come in the accountability. If you know what your kids are listening to and what your kids are doing, then we're going to know what how evident it is in culture. But the following that she has is huge. She when she was brought into the political sphere, she began debating people, and she's gotten all this publicity.
Yeah.
because of something that would absolutely terrify me to have anybody watch.
And I mean, this isn't new. You know, we can go all the way back to kind of where the whole anti-vaxxer crowd comes from, and where does that begin? You know, an MTV artist decides that she's going to tell us that that vaccinations produce autism, and that's where the anti-vaxxer crowd really finds their I guess their voice. So it's not like it's new that a celebrity would suddenly become a political activist, but it still should shock us, right?
She's probably the top pop personality in the country, maybe even in the world right now.
Yeah, right now, absolutely.
Yeah.
And she puts out a song that is basically pornographic, and it's number one. How does that happen? How does a song like that happen?
Well, I think
become number one.
I think the pornographic thing has to really hit wrong, because I read it. And then honestly, like, you read it and feel like you need to confess it, because but you're trying to do an arts entertainment podcast. It's not artistic, right? So what's the draw? The draw is the pornographic nature of it, right? It's got the same draw that porn would, because there's a draw for a sexual gratification. It's not a draw for an artistic gratification. There's nothing artistic about stringing together that many explicatives and stringing together that much sexual content. There's no effort at art here. There's just an effort at vile and at sexual gratification.
And there just to be fair, for what it's worth, there is a cleaned up version that's out there where they've taken a lot of that, but it's still very suggestive. Everything they replaced it with is still suggestive, and the song didn't reach number one based off of its clean version.
Okay.
I'm certain that it is the full explicit version that pushed it to number one.
And we should be clear, like, these two guys probably have a whole lot more understanding about popular culture than I do. I'm not very, like, I don't know I don't believe I know a single song in the Billboard top 10 right now. I read through it. I don't think I know a single one, so I'm just a huge dork and a nerd when it comes to this stuff. So they weren't really surprised. You guys weren't all that surprised. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what is this?
Well,
man?
I mean, I don't really know a lot of this artist's stuff, but I wasn't
whatever.
surprised.
It's your favorite, right? You know the words.
No. I know more about number two.
I know what you're talking about.
Well, you asked, why is it number one?
How does it happen?
How did that happen? Because we became blind to what, to defining things as,
in a post-Me Too movement culture,
wild, isn't it?
How does this happen?
Yeah, we became blind to, number one, being able to say anything bad about any thing without labeling them, without being accusatory. We can't confront anybody in their argument in hopes of changing somebody's mind, because we can't agree on where we're coming from. But I think that we're blind to what it means to be pure. When I think pornography and the internet movement that ushered it into the full effect that we see it now has blinded us, because the song and the video and everything that it is still isn't as bad as what else you can look up. So it's if we look at it and through in the big picture of what's out there to be seen on the internet, it's not as bad as what you can see, and that's the problem, is that we have things that are worse than that.
Well, and I mean, we're looking, so we're going to bring this back around and address this kind of cuties thing. And I think there's a relationship. Of course, there's the sexualization even of young children in that, which should be very concerning. Some of what we got to talk about is the fact that as parents and adult leaders, we've got to know what our children are listening to, what they're watching. But I think there's also the reality that we've got to expose them to better things. We need to expose them, help to develop a taste in them, or the ability for them to have a taste that desires more than that they would desire something that has roots to it, that would have girth to it, as opposed to just the junk food that gets thrown at them with this stuff. Like, we'll talk about the fact that there's no artistic appreciation in it, but have we really taught our kids to appreciate good music?
That's exactly. I talked to my kids last night about who Boys to Men were, because that's the generation that I grew up in. And I said, somebody.
By the way, I heard them referred to as the original boy band the other day, and I just felt like that was a slap in the face of Boys to Men, right?
It
I mean, I know it's
is.
a group of guys that did a band, but isn't that a slap in the face?
Well, it's also a slap in the face to New Kids on the Block.
Earth, Wind, and Fire would, do something to
I
you.
don't think that's fair.
Or the
Stop,
Turtles,
stop,
or the
stop,
Beatles.
stop.
Come
Go
on.
ahead.
Anyway,
Go ahead.
I told them, I said, you need to appreciate what good music sounds like. I said, for me, they're the
You
top
went to Boys to Men.
Well, I said, for me, I said R&B. I
This is
said, they're the top R&B group.
Okay.
I said, we can argue about Earth, Wind, and Fire and against Boys to Men. I said, but I told them, I said, somebody's going to look at you one day and say, I appreciate the fact that you know who they are. And it's true. But nobody's ever going to look at you and say, I appreciate the fact that you know what that song.
And you like my kids are older than yours, especially well, my two oldest ones are older than yours, and so when Wyatt had a music class at the middle school, and they began talking about not just what's in popular culture today, but something like Queen, for instance.
Yeah.
And he knows who that is, and he knows what they sang. Obviously, we can still have a conversation about the fact that there were some cultural things they were pushing that we were very opposed to. But no question about the ability of Freddie Mercury to sing and about the ability of Queen to create incredible content and great music. But exactly what you're talking about, the teacher that goes, you know what that is?
Yeah.
And nobody else in the class, or if they did, they didn't speak up. Don't appreciate what's there.
Yeah. And back to the point about
Boys to Men.
parents need to know what their children are listening to. I do want to say we say that we want you to know, we want parents to know what they're listening to. But if any of our listeners or viewers want to go look up this particular song, you just be warned.
Yeah.
Just please be warned.
Well,
it is the most graphic thing you will probably come across in your lifetime.
Hopefully in a long time. But even if we want to know what they're listening to, I've got my AirPods in my pocket right here. It's a different world. I know what my kids are listening to when they're in the truck with me, but when they put their earbuds in, I don't know what's going in. So what am I doing when I have the opportunity to influence them?
And that's where you started with being able to appreciate.
Yeah.
A lot of the music that we listen to now, me and you have a lot of fun with. They all sound exactly the same. They actually have created algorithms and formulas that say this works with popular in popular culture. So
this genre has one formula, and this genre
make
has
your
another
song
formula.
sound like this, and it'll be a hit.
So are you suggesting Boyz II Men is better than Florida Georgia Line?
R&B, they are.
I think that's
that's not really.
that's
You're
a
going to have that question.
I'm not-
Yes, the answer is yes.
The answer is yes, but the statistics say that they're probably.
I don't care
equal.
about the statistics.
Well, I'm not arguing about who's better, because for me, absolutely. But
Kareem scored more points than Jordan, but was he better? Don't tell me about statistics. Just tell me what was better.
Florida Georgia Line has the #1 all-time selling single.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, however we're going to calculate better. Subjectively, I absolutely agree with Boyz II Men. Anyway, being able to expose them to things that they can appreciate and say, this is what music is. We all like to say this is what real music sounds like, but we don't have to say that if we've exposed them to the entire gambit of music. Then they can define for themselves what good music is. But if you only let them listen to this, and there's this out there, eventually they're going to get to the rest of it and not know what to do with it.
Well, but, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
I'll ask you this question. You said something that I would argue a bit with, and I don't even know if we're going to get to the cuties thing, but you said let them define for themselves what good music is, but that sort of suggests that there is not an objective definition for what good music is. Is there not an objective way for us to determine what is good?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure there would be an objective way.
Good is objective.
Good. You can't account for taste, and taste is going to run the gambit.
You can't account for taste, but we can still say that there's some things, and I'm not the musician
skill,
here.
artistry.
There's something right. Thing. So if I look at Otis Redding, right?
Nobody's going to argue against you.
I know that. That's what I'm saying. That's good music. Even and just because somebody might produce a song today that would sell more copies,
absolutely,
right? Like the #1 album that we're talking about right now, right? The #1 song Okay, we're not going to look at that and say it's good music, and and yet it's still maybe more successful.
Mm-hmm.
So helping by exposing our kids to good music, we're not allowing them to define what good music is, but to recognize good music, and at the same time to be able to walk away from some of the trash.
And this hints on something I talked about with a guy interviewed about the Christian music and Christian film industry. We sort of discussed the fact that business trumps art.
Right.
Business is in our culture. The business side is going to trump the artistry every time because it's a music business. It's a film. It's a movie business. It's all these things. They're trying to make money, and the truth is, I mean, it's been true for a long time that sex sells.
It does, and it's not just. So we talk about sex sells in the secular world, but even you're talking about Christian industry or Christian music industry. Even the Christian music industry doesn't always promote the best music,
The best artistry.
or even the best production of that. I told you I've seen For King and Country in concert, and it blew me away. They were unbelievable. I mean, this is maybe exaggerating a bit here, but I mean, we're talking Mumford & Sons quality. I mean, very good. I listen to what gets then produced for them to be played on Christian radio
edit.
and
Yeah.
it's not even fair.
Right.
No.
It's not even fair.
It's
But
not.
what does Christian radio play? What is their target audience? Right, target audience is soccer moms, right? Moms in minivans is what they're aiming for, and that's moms in minivans aren't bad people, but I'm just saying they've got their target goal there.
So along the topic of sex sells, let's shift now and spend the last 10 minutes or so on cuties.
Okay.
It's been all over social media. There's a lot of people have been writing blogs and doing podcasts and slamming it, and then there are people
Which is why we're doing it. We want to be popular.
That's right. And then there are a lot of people who are praising it, but I really have an issue.
Not that many of them anymore. They're falling by the wayside.
I really have an issue. How are you going to make something that's rated mature that your stars can't watch? And people, kids.
Is it rated mature?
It is rated mature,
Okay.
TV mature.
Okay.
The stars shouldn't be watching it. So who's your audience? If you're making something about little girls that's rated TV mature, who's your audience?
Well, that question terrifies me.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah, exactly.
But even the argument is that they're creating this. I don't guess they call it a biopic since it's about. I guess it would be because it's about an individual. And her coming of age and questioning her sexuality and sort of rebelling against her parents' norms. I can be opposed to a lot of those things just out of the gate if she was 16 or 18. But we're talking about an 11-year-old girl. Like, the idea that we should encourage or celebrate an 11-year-old girl exploring her sexuality is terrifying to me. It's absolutely. I've got an 11-year-old girl, and that is terrifying to me, because my responsibility as her parent right now is to protect her from these things. I've watched none of the trailers.
Right.
I've watched none of it.
I've watched none of them. Disclaimer.
What I've gone through is I've read the detailed accounts of exactly what's happening. We've got it. I'm operating under the assumption these people are telling the truth, but we've got situations where we're promoting, preteen, 11-year-old girls dancing in front of men to get attention or to get out of trouble. Preteen girls who are taking pictures of their private body parts and texting them out. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we should be actively advocating against. And this isn't just a Christian thing. Like, as a culture, as a society who wants to protect children, we should be actively advocating against. And yet, we've got this giant conglomerate, Netflix, that believes that this is something that is to be promoted. I mean, it comes out of France, so let's just be aware that in the French culture, the idea of pedophilia is not as terrifying as it is to us, right? I won't say, they wouldn't probably use that phrase, but there's an openness to to those things that we certainly don't share here in America, nor should we, from a Judeo-Christian worldview. But it's not just about a filmmaker, it's about a conglomerate like Netflix that says this is something we're going to promote. And not just promote, they've decided to live and die by it, amidst all the outrage, they're going to keep pushing it. So,
right. And I asked a question, in a post-Me Too world, how does this number one song become number one? So it's a similar question. In a post-Jeffrey Epstein world, how does this get made?
You talk about Jeff Epstein, I'm thinking about like Rachel Denhollander and the Mississippi State fallout, where we've got gymnasts, young gymnasts who are being...
Michigan.
What did I say?
Mississippi.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Michigan State. That's Mississippi's your home.
That's right.
But young gymnasts that are being sexually abused by coaches. And, of course, a larger fallout is USA Gymnastics is really in turmoil over this particular thing. And yet we essentially have this movie that promotes that. Go ahead. I think...
Even before Michigan State was Penn State... But why did it take a movie to turn our heads about, I think it happens a little bit at a time. I think the culture that we lived in, the protection that the individual wants of their body and their mind and their thoughts, you can't have a conversation about what's bad and what's good or what's right and what's wrong without somebody claiming, that they are entitled.
Well,
because then, if they're entitled to something, you've automatically claimed victimhood. If because this is mine because.
And I mean, you're talking about that, right? So we can be really specific about the fact that what we see being promoted for, the thought process behind this movie is apparently this young girl sees somebody twerking, which is sexually suggestive stripper pole dancing. I mean, that's what it is. See somebody doing that and goes, that's what I want to be a part of. A bigger question to ask beyond the movie is, how have we allowed that to become common? And I think this is where you're going. Yeah. How have we allowed that to become common in the culture of our children, right? I mean, we had this is a big part of the conversation we had the other day was we're seeing in cheer competitions, cheer routines, dance routines, and again, we're three dads of daughters, so there are four
all
little
of
girls.
Them dance.
Yeah, four little girls represented here. There's dance, there's gymnastics, and cheerleading, all represented right here, and it's some of that concern that we have about the fact that much of what we see promoted as dancing for even 6, 7, 8-year-old little girls is incredibly sexualized. And rather than speaking into that culture, standing against that culture, we've seen parents really on the sideline just slowly begin to accept that. And then we have a movie that comes out, very few people even talking about the twerking aspect, the sexualized dancing, because, well, that's just part of it, right? I mean, that's kind of the argument that comes. And it's got to go this much further before we get there. But the reality is we don't go that much further from sexualized dancing among 7 and 8-year-olds to using your body to try and get an advantage over older men. The leap is just not that far.
And to singing and dancing along with songs like the one we've talked about.
And why don't parents, or why don't they have the ability to say anything? Because many ability to speak out and say, I don't want my daughter to be a part of something like that. Often, and we've had this discussion too, is because you identify as a dance person. And you're not able to stand against the crowd because then you'll lose your crowd.
Yeah, or you're afraid. Parents get afraid. Because if I say my daughter is not going to wear that outfit, right, then my daughter might not get to participate.
That's right.
If I say I'm uncomfortable with that dance routine, my daughter may not get to participate, if I'm not comfortable with these things.
But you can't oppose the movie without opposing the culture.
Yeah, one of y'all said that in the hallway.
Yeah.
It's so true. We'll give you credit.
Probably.
Was it you? I'm not, but it's right. It's right. It's right. Yeah. At what point do we say, okay, the culture that's created this movie just celebrates the culture, that's risen up around this.
I was reading. I just started a new book on art and Christianity. It's on the bottom over there, and he just said, artistry is prophetic to culture. So you've often said that politics is downstream of
There
culture.
you go. Mm-hmm.
Artistry is upstream
That's right.
of culture.
Yep.
That's right.
And so if
it
we
creates culture.
It creates culture, and so we see this sort of artistry is a reflection of where our culture is going.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we can, for those of you that are paying attention and want to start off, we can go back and look at the postmodernism that's infected our culture today. And if this goes too far for some of you, just brace with me for a minute. But the postmodernism postmodernism is essentially a rejection of meta narrative. Postmodernism is your truth and my truth is my truth, and it's mainstream today. But it didn't begin mainstream. It actually began in the arts and eventually made into the humanities. But postmodernism begins with postmodern painters, right? And those postmodern painters affect and influence postmodern writers and novelists, and eventually that art filters its way down into the academy, and then eventually that academic discipline of postmodernism begins to mutate, shape, and change, and it eventually makes its way out into the culture. And we can't miss the fact that even in this we can go all the way back to a Martin Polanski, right? Who is convicted. Well, I guess convicted would be the term of sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl, but continues to receive awards from the Hollywood elite, even though he's a sexual predator. He flees to France and is never extradited to face punishment here. But until the Me Too movement, so we're talking about this happened in the 70s.
That's right.
And it's not until the Me Too movement that finally you've got some folks in Hollywood that go, whoa, maybe we shouldn't support this guy. And it's still not all of them, right? Because he was an artist and he was creating things. So just being aware that there's an effort to push a narrative right here, and we need to be aware of that. But just, I guess we're probably coming short on time.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
sure.
fine.
Well, then I'll take over for a minute and kind of shift us back around to some things that are super application driven for parents that might hear this. And to tie sort of this music thing and the cheer thing all into one place. What are we doing as parents, first of all, to train our kids to appreciate, to recognize, and to acknowledge the good, the beautiful, and the pure? And I think that we've got to move beyond a simplistic, popular level Christian mindset that says, well, turn on K-Love and everything will be fine. Because Christian music can be good, beautiful, and pure. Sometimes it's good in the sense of being good and gospel-centered, but it's not beautiful at all. Sometimes Christian music can fall prey to the same thing. You're talking about pop music with just the algorithms that teach us what we need to do. And then, of course, you can have Chris Tomlin create a country song that was just awful. Jeez. Sorry. Go ahead.
My application point would be to do your homework. Don't let culture define what's right and what's wrong for you. Even in Christian culture, we can say that we love this artist, and they might make beautiful music.
And
but
then they do one with Florida Georgia Line, and you want to throw up. Oh, we're not talking about the same thing.
But what do they stand for? Will they speak out against anything that threatens their sales or that threatens their label or their name? So before you tell your kid that this is a good person, or you can, I look at, my son and say, it's okay, you can be like him. You can, do what that person does, or you can research and find out what that person stands for. Before you say that, actually find out what those people stand for, not just how they sound or what they look like, but what do they portray in their life? Do they believe in a meta-narrative, an ultimate good, ultimate right, and ultimate wrong? Or are they ultimately only worried about what sells?
And I would say, I guess we're trying to wrap up here.
I don't know. I mean, I was just trying to move some application. We can keep going. Y'all talk forever.
Yeah, but we're past half an hour, so let's wrap it up. I would say add to that. know that the content that's popular, the content that's out there, is the content that's selling, and there are artists who are out there that are trying to do this right, and trying to be good influences, and trying to get.
They might be broke.
Yes, trying to
They
get
often
wholesome,
are. Yeah.
wholesome content out there. Go look for them.
Yeah.
Go find them and support them, because if you support them, then they'll be able to do more.
That's right.
And get more content out there.
And support them financially.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, not trying to be that guy, but don't just put it on the YouTube and listen to it on replay. Go buy the album so that those folks are encouraged to make more music or purchase their books. The other thing I'll say, and then I'll try my best to let this be the last thing I'll say, but as parents, we've got to be willing to speak up and speak out. And not just in our own homes. I got a friend, and it's not original to him. You know, it was his dad saying it. It wasn't original to his dad either. But when good men do nothing, evil prevails. And the same is true. It's not always this blatant form of evil, but when we refuse to do anything, bad things kind of continue to proliferate. And I had a parent here in the church the other day. Was talking about how frustrated they were with the way that their kids' rec practices are going, and so they had like a team meeting, and this dad just spoke up and said, "Look, is there any way we could adjust this practice schedule, because this just doesn't fit our family? You're killing us. I'm not on board for where we are." I don't know what the outcome of that was, but he was the only person that spoke up. And afterward, he had several parents that came to him and said, "Man, I really appreciate you saying that."
Glad you said that. Yeah,
exactly, because we've been thinking the same thing, and it's been, I don't know when to shut up. So, but it has been my experience more often than not, when I speak up with questions or concerns about a classroom situation or a sports team or a dance team. More times than not, I've got somebody, and usually multiple somebodies, that are going, "I'm glad you asked that question," because I was thinking the same thing, but I thought I was the only one. You're almost never the only one.
Right.
You're almost never the only one. And even if you are, if the questions or concerns you have are right, have the courage to speak up and to speak out. You might be able to make a significant impact on your kids' lives and on the lives of other children.
Kids.
Yeah. All right. Any last words?
Yep. I'm good.
We're good? All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening from the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast, and from the Ordinary Christian Podcast, which is Craig Thompson's podcast. This will be posted on both.
Yeah.
And so we'll hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you found it informative, and we will see you next week. Thank you. This has been the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast with author, musician, and worship pastor Keven Newsome. Thank you for joining us today, for your comments, and for subscribing. See you next time.